like 10 a minute, honestly. It's ridiculous. And she didn't even draw it. She didn't even design it. It's like hilarious. Like let's like talk a little bit about that. I'm sorry. I go off on tangents because
No,
I
that's
love
all
just
right.
like chatting
I'm
on.
glad, me too. So yeah.
But I mean, like, well, what? So you teach citizenship,
Yes.
and that's secondary, primary. Like, tell us, like, I mean,
So
I do know, but I kind of want to like draw it out for listeners.
yeah, no problem. So I teach citizenship, secondary, yes, 10s and 11s. So they take it for their GCSE option. And the lessons are politics, law, looking at the media, um, teaching children about their rights, getting them to be able to like think critically, weigh up evidence, to be able to analyze and evaluate. Just on many things that we come across, right? So it might be to do with, um, for example, the Russia and Ukraine war, looking at that, and um, the different. Oh my gosh, I've literally lost the train of thought. Like the different the countries involved. It might be looking at Brexit, looking at the EU. We might be looking at like the media and how the media um, publishes during elections. And yeah, I love teaching it because children, like, they'll need it for a lifetime, right?
Sure, yeah.
Looking at citizenship, because they're going to vote, they're going to be citizens, and I want them to be active citizens. So just not just like, bobbling along, but actually be active and participate as good human beings and be try to make a change. And that's what I'm trying to do
I mean,
with citizenship. That's what I do.
yeah, that's what I do for sure. I
That's what
mean,
I do. Yes.
I mean, I think there definitely is a generation. When I left teaching, I tutored privately for a little bit, and then
Yeah.
like you'd meet these like year 9, year 10 students, and there's definitely a generation of young people who are very passive, who don't really.
Mm,
I wouldn't say like
mm,
it sounds harsh when I say they don't care, but it's they've not been taught to care or like the relevance
yeah.
in their life or in their
Mm.
community. So it becomes like a little bit of a break, doesn't it? Like, is it something that you've always done? Have you always been like interested in doing it? Like, where's it come from?
Oh my gosh. So I've been working in education for about 10 years now. Before I was actually a teacher, I was a pastoral support leader um, within the secondary school I was working in. And I was doing some interventions. And the assistant head at the time said to me, "Oh, have you ever considered being a teacher?" It's like, nah, this is not for me. Like, you look like you work way too hard,
Well, yeah,
taking too much home. I've got 2 kids. I don't know if this is my portion. I don't think so. And she was just like, "Look, job security." And that was it. And I thought, you know what? She's not wrong. And I was so grateful. Look at the pandemic. Like, that job security was needed, right?
Oh my god. Well, yeah, yeah, for sure.
So the school trained me to become a teacher, and being a pastoral support leader, like, becoming a teacher for citizenship just seemed like the perfect segue. Like, you, as a pastoral support leader, you help children and you support children with and needs, mental health needs, or something that might be going on at home or within school, and you're supporting them, championing them, being their coach. So citizenship just felt like the perfect fit for me. And ever since then, like, I've just love teaching citizenship, getting the kids angry and
Yeah.
getting them
Yeah.
motivated to make a change. But you're right. Like, students are still passive because a lot of them, they can't see how they can make a change at the age they are, and that sometimes is a challenge.
Yeah. And I think like more and more people I speak to from like sort of different like educational backgrounds and like different ways they
Mm,
became like educators or whatever. It seems to me that one thing that's really coming through like post pandemic is that they just need like a way to express
mm,
themselves. And like I listen to I don't know if you like listen to Stephen Bartlett's podcast, The Diary of a CEO. Like it's not really about being a CEO at all. I think that
yeah.
probably was the aim at the beginning, but it's not now. But so he had like Simon Sinek on, who did
Okay.
that like TED talk about like find your why and all this that everyone always
Mm,
references. when people feel a bit lost in general in their pathway. And he was basically saying that, we teach kids like trigonometry, we teach them like all this stuff, but we don't teach them how to have like difficult conversations. We don't teach them how to argue in an assertive but not aggressive way. We don't teach them to be excited about the change that like they can make, and not sound cheesy, but it's like, it's like you say, oh, like, be the change you want to see, isn't it, really? And
Mm.
I mean, that for me in school was like the best lessons, honestly, were the ones where like you actually felt heard. You actually felt like your teachers were like listening to you. You could have like this debate, and it really does kind of surface everybody's personal experiences at home and outside school, and the things that they're doing. And it is extremely interesting to kind of see that. I don't know, like sometimes you think, oh, they'll like definitely agree with that person, or they'll disagree with that person, or you almost like, I don't know why, you presume, don't you, in your head as like a teacher, that like kids are kind of all thinking in a similar way. But when you kind of scratch below the surface and you actually get into the nitty gritty of it, I imagine it's like, I don't know, it's quite eye opening because you get to know them on like a completely different level. Do you,
Yeah, most
do,
definitely. Like we do quite a few debates in our lessons, and yes, they are constructed by me, like the topics most of the time, to help with like their writing or like just presenting arguments. But you're right, like sometimes I am shocked at the thoughts or views that they have. But I I have learned to ensure that before these debates happen, just kind of have a bit of terms and conditions at the
a T's and
start.
C's, if you will?
It has to be yeah, there has to be, right? Because students have to know like this is a safe space, this is a free space for you to talk. So whatever's said in the classroom has to stay within the classroom. I don't want you to go out into the playground and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that. Like we've got opposing views, because it's okay to have opposing views. But as the adult, if there is something that might be discriminatory, that I will pick that up within the classroom. Um, and I think having that at the beginning, students have become a lot more comfortable in what they say and how they argue with each other, in an appropriate way as well,
Yeah.
and challenge each other's thoughts. And that's what I try to make them do. Like sometimes be the devil's advocate, challenge somebody on why they think that way, like kind of work it out. And it's okay if it's different from how you think. That's okay. Doesn't mean we have to like beat up on that person, or like not talk to that person at all. Like it's okay. You can still shake hands and leave the classroom. Um, but yeah, but and also watching as well, like you just said, picked up on what might be brought in from the outside, what's going on from the outside as well. What they're exposed to as well. You definitely find that like what's going on either in their community or what's going on at home, and then having to navigate that, and those conversations in the classroom can sometimes be challenging, but it's part of the job, part of parcel.
I
Yeah.
imagine like quite a lot of stuff comes out in those sessions that you're like, oh, I should like maybe flag that, or it's quite
Mm.
telling that, like I was saying before, like it is almost like a, I had no idea. Like some kids that I used to teach, it'd be like, so this is an example. You'd be like, oh, like
Mm.
they've gone through school, right? And they're like, the kid who's like, oh God, like you've got, I don't know, Billy this year,
Yeah.
and it's almost like a, ah, good God, like, oh, sorry, I'm getting a bit of interference. It's gone now.
Yeah.
Just let me know if you can hear anything weird.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything.
Teddy is like, anyway, but and people be like, oh, you've got Billy this year, and then it'd be a case
Mm.
of, oh, okay, right, well, let's come up with like a plan on how we're gonna put all this stuff in place. And then when you actually get to know this kid, you realize all the stuff that they're dealing with before 9 o'clock, and then after four
Mm.
o'clock, and it's like, how are they even getting up in the morning? Like how are they functioning? And it is quite amazing to see um some of the stuff that, and you think like, these are like, I used to teach like year 6, so you're thinking, oh, like 10, 11, like how drastic or how bad could it really be? But
Yeah.
really, it's not to be underestimated. And I think, like, as a young teacher, like, I really did underestimate that. And that's the danger,
Mm.
isn't it, that we don't kind of spot these issues like outside the classroom, or because we are social workers as well as teachers when we're in
Oh,
that
yes, we are.
position, aren't we? It's like we're doing all this other stuff, but like, yeah, it's that's why I always have like a gripe about, like, when people are like, oh, teachers do like so many hours and then you do this, but it's like, well, actually, no, because if you've had a day where you've had a safeguard or something's come to light, you take
Mm.
that home. How could you not? Because you're that person. That teachers are those people, right? Like, you just
Yeah,
carry the weight of the
exactly.
world, don't you? But
And we're not always privy as well to what happens next, right? You don't always know the next step. So you take this on, you report it, and then sometimes it's like, okay, I just hope that everything's all right, and you might check in, and depending on what's happened, again, you might not be able to know what's actually what's on the other side, how it's been dealt with, or what's actually going on. You only know what's necessary for you to be able to teach this young person.
yeah, which is, it's
So,
weird, isn't it? Like, in a way to think of it as
mm,
like closure. Like, you just need to know, don't you? That is that kid gonna be all right? Like, so I can just like get my head straight. But yeah,
yeah,
it's a weird one. Have you got like any topics that kind of feel like when you're going into them, you're like, I know this is gonna be like real fiery, or it's gonna bring up some stuff that needs to be more carefully managed, or do you have anything like that?
yeah. When we talk about political parties,
Oh my
that
god.
is,
Yeah. Can
yeah,
imagine.
right?
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, because most of these kids, their views are their parents' views,
The
right?
Daily Mail.
Or
You mean the Daily
generational.
Mail, basically? That's
Yeah.
that's what it would be. It would just be like whatever they saw on the newspaper on the table, won't it?
Yeah, that's what it is, and so yes, young people have such strong views on who they should support and why should they support them, and but don't really understand the bigger picture behind a lot of it. So they feel like this is the best, but maybe not the impact it can have on a certain community
Yeah.
or a certain cohort. Do you know what I mean? They just feel, well, this is the best, and this is why I agree with them. And my mother and my grandmother and everyone's supported them for generations. So, do you know? I'm like, it's like, really what you think? Regardless of what it is, like, I still have to pick, no matter who you like support, is that really what you believe? With the generation that we're in, that your
Sure.
generation and the environment that we're in now, or is that what somebody else thinks? So yeah, so those are the interesting debates that we've had. I'm trying to think of what else came up that was interesting. Oh, should we bring back the death penalty? That was interesting.
I feel like we've been debating this for like decades in schools, like it's part of like some reading paper or
It
something.
is. I feel like it is. It's always an interesting one though, because naturally I thought majority of students would be like, no, we should not. But I've had quite a few that's like, yes. I had more that said yes actually compared to no.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
But
yeah.
but but like the realities of that, I mean, I just feel like we're gonna end up in some sort of like agreeable debate. I don't know. But the point is that if you bring back the death penalty, it's like my big gripe with it is like, for say someone's done like the worst thing possible. Like,
Mm,
if you imagine in your head like the absolute worst crime that anyone could ever do, and
mhm.
then you're like, right, okay, sentenced to death. In my head, the likelihood is they don't really care. It's just an easy way out for them. And I'm sure like a lot of
Yeah,
students say that it's an easy way out. They should
yeah,
do the time,
yeah.
they should like try and make steps towards like reformation. And then the other
Mm,
side of it is that, what if they're incorrectly convicted, which happens in the US all the time. There's like so
all
many
the
people
time,
just sat
right?
on death row who have been there for like their entire life. They'll probably die before they do go on onto death row, because it's so long. Like, and over there it's like more of a business, isn't it, than it is like a correctional
Yeah, definitely is.
facility. So it's it's a weird one.
Not
but
much rehabilitation.
but that, I think that comes from a place of anger, doesn't it? Where it's like, yeah, they should
Mm,
definitely. My dad actually said the other week, like, again, bearing in mind he is elderly and from a completely different generation, they should bring back public hangings. And I was like, oh my
okay.
god, no. who's gonna watch that? That's horrific. That was the first thought I
Mm-hmm.
had. Who's gonna
Mm-hmm.
watch that? How millennial is that of me to say? Who's gonna watch that?
I love that's the first thing you went to as well. Like, actually, Dad, who's going to watch this?
Who's gonna watch that when there's Selling Sunset and Stranger Things on Netflix? That's awful. That's so bad. But it's like, well, in honesty, like, who's gonna be like, oh yeah, you're gonna go watch The Hanging at the? It's just weird.
Oh, that
But
gives
then
me shivers. Yeah,
back then, that was like a form of,
normal, right?
I don't want to say
Mm.
entertainment, but I guess it was. It's weird, isn't it? But it's
I'm glad our entertainment has moved on since then.
yeah, just a bit, but it's
Yeah.
the political thing's interesting because like at the tender age of 32, I still have no idea. Like I literally have no idea who I support and why because in like my head, they're all as kind of backwards as each other at the moment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like even the Brexit thing, like they kind of say, don't they? And then like you find out it's a bunch of lies. And it's like, well, how are
Yeah.
young people meant to how are they meant to know who to believe
Mm-hmm.
if it ends up being a complete load of
Yeah.
lies
And I think
anyway?
this is what I find in my classroom. A lot of the young people just have a huge distrust in politics. Look at
Yeah.
what's going on right now at the moment, right? They're just like, what do we believe? What do we like? What where do we side? If someone's saying this but doing the opposite thing, and they're supposed to be running the country, then what rules then apply to me? But I've still got to follow the rules.
Yeah,
Do you
sure.
know, like, and so they're, and that's why they also struggle with making a change because these people in politics, whichever party it is, there's always some like kind of cloud over them. There's always
Yeah.
been like some sort of cloud or something over them. So young people are like, well, either they're not trustful, they're doing whatever they want, so I'm going to do whatever I want. And it's getting past that. That sometimes is a challenging bit. It's getting past that kind of momentum or thought process that they have. Actually, okay, if you see something's not wrong, what can we do? Not just because they're someone in power, they're someone of authority. What can you do as an individual that can make a change? You know, look past that. This is why you should vote. This is why, you know, your vote is important. Um, yeah, young kids are
I-
awesome. They are awesome.
that's the big thing, isn't it? Like getting them to vote. I mean,
Mm.
I don't know if you remember, like a few months ago in the news, there was like I think a school had done like a debate, hadn't they, about basically I think it was something to
Mm.
do with like how the government had failed in lockdown and should Boris Johnson like go. And then they like flipped, the government completely flipped over it, didn't they? And they were like, oh, you've got to make
Yeah.
sure that you're not like teaching kids like one party is better than the other. But it's
Yeah.
like, but you're kind of doing that yourselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not really
And
fair to
that's
say.
exactly, and that's what I do. You just put up an article of the day, no matter who's it about, who it is about. Just pull an article. This is what's in the news today, guys. Let's discuss. Do you know what I mean? And that's where you see the kids shine. That's when you see the kids get angry and get motivated. Like, what? This is going on in the world? Like, they're supposed to be doing this? Like, yep. So, and you know, you kind of then start questioning them, like, try to get the answer out of them. What can be done? What do we need to do? Who can we call upon? How can we make the changes? So, even though I've said like students find it difficult sometimes, once they're presented with the once they're presented with what's in the media, what's what they can see. Like I'm not can't change it. They see it on their tellies, right? They see it on the news, they see it on their social media. And once you kind of question them and get them to start thinking critically about the evidence that's in front of them, that's when you see the beauty. That's when they're like, okay, this is something needs to happen here.
I bet it's like really empowering, like being in one of your lessons. It sounds, I mean, I would have loved to have taken that as like a subject, but like, I feel like that wasn't an option. I wonder why it was. Is it like quite a new thing or?
No, because I had to study citizenship when I was at school.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like I was just. I mean, I feel kind of cheated out of it now because it sounds something like right up my street. Like I'd love that because I'm. I know I say like I'm not, but I do like a debate, and I do
mm,
feel like it is good for your soul. It's good to be challenged. It's good to you know
mhm.
mess with those like preconceptions. Where do you like you're saying that you pull up an article? Like, I'm pretty interested to know where do you like normally get your news from? Would you kind of like you say play devil's advocate and like show them like different news articles and
Oh
say
no,
like
I show them different news articles. I don't ever just do like one newspaper. I will do different articles from not just from the UK, from abroad as well. I might present like two points of views. And because that's powerful in itself, right? How news is presented, and maybe the political swing of a certain newspaper, and how they're presenting news. So yeah, I just show them like a bunch of stuff. I don't ever like choose one newspaper source at all.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people are saying, aren't they? Like they call used to be like, oh, mainstream media, and now it's like, oh, legacy media, which has connotations of, I suppose, that it's on its way out, doesn't it? So it's like, who
Hmm.
can you trust? Like, and that's the big thing. That's like a big overarching debate,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like, who can you
Yes.
actually trust? In terms of where you get your news from, because
Hmm.
I mean, my dad's like, oh, I read all the time, like, and he's always been a big reader, like, loves
Yeah.
books. But then he's like, oh, did you hear about this? And then I've heard it like somewhere slightly different. So I'm like, yeah, but you're forgetting this part of the story, and like, there's it's a bit more
Yeah.
nuance than just what like
Hmm.
some columnist said who writes for like some
Exactly.
tabloid or whatever. But
Hmm.
um, that's a really really difficult one. And then something that I'm like really interested in. It's like quite an interesting topic, and I like really try my best to like understand it, because it's not like my lived experience. It's not
Mm.
like I can't understand. I can like empathize with it, but they did like a Channel 4 series, didn't they, about how we are not diverse enough in our curriculum, like, and that like
Yeah.
how how it changed. It was like, oh, we got to do British values,
Hmm.
and I don't know what it was. Maybe because I didn't grow up in England, so when I saw that British values, I was like, what does that actually mean? Because I don't feel like identity wise, I really know what it means. Is it scones? Is it jam? Is it street parties? I have no idea. I literally have no idea. If you tell me it's about being kind, I'm like, well, sure, that's everybody's
Oh, so I can
values.
tell you, like, so I've got to teach the British values, which is democracy. You have the rule of law, which means like no one is above the law. You have individual liberty, and you have mutual respect and tolerance. So those are the four British values I have to
Oh,
teach within
okay.
my subjects. Yeah,
Yeah, so in
yeah.
primary, you're told you have to like incorporate it. I know like the
Mm.
democracy one, but I didn't know like the other three. You did mention the
Yeah.
three others, didn't you? I'm not just like,
Yes, there is three others. No,
phew,
no,
I can
you
count,
heard that
I
right.
can count. It's but yeah, we're just kind of told like think about it in everything you do, and like
Mm.
how you plan your trips, and that's like fine and everything, but it does worry me that we teach like certain things that even history,
Mm.
like we don't draw in on sources as much as we would do in primary, like they do in
Yeah.
secondary, and they look at different views
Mm.
and different sort of sources. And Channel 4 did this thing about how we don't really teach a lot of Black history. We have Black History Month, and
Yeah.
that's kind of it. And it's like, if you actually
Mm.
think about how England was built, it's got a really, really strong Black history, actually, and no one mentions
Yeah, it
that.
has.
It's because it's
Mm-hmm.
such a terrible and awful like
Mm.
past for people to acknowledge, that God forbid that our country would be built on anything other than rainbows and sunshine. And it's
Skittles.
well, yeah, well, pretty much. And I don't know. I just like I saw like the article about like Black Joy that you were kind. I don't know.
Mm.
It kind of like sprung my interest, and that was before the Channel 4 thing. So I've been kind of
Yeah.
like thinking about this for a while, about how teachers can, especially white teachers as well, or other ethnicities that aren't Black, how they can
Yeah.
kind of incorporate that sort of um you
Mm.
know thing in their lessons. Or I mean, well, let's take it back a bit, like, and talk a bit
Okay.
about the Black Joy thing. Like, where's that come from? That must be pretty exciting, that people are like, oh, look at what Tanisha's doing.
Well, it didn't come from something that exciting, unfortunately. So during lockdown, we had the death of George Floyd, and I was homeschooling my two kids, and I was teaching, and you couldn't escape conversations about race on TV. It was
Yeah.
all over the place. It brought up so many other things, didn't it? It wasn't just about the death of George Floyd. It was about racism. It was about so many, the lack of seeing Black people on your media, in history, in schools. It was, you couldn't escape it. And it was obviously during a time where we only had our screens because we was at home. And my daughter, and I've already spoke to her about this, so she's very comfortable with me saying this. She turned around one day and said to me, she feels sad to be Black. And that was her words.
Wow.
Yeah, that was her words. And
That must hurt.
it it ripped me in two,
Yeah,
Amy.
yeah, I bet. I
Literally,
bet.
like hearing that. and you go into like panic mode, but trying to like save her as well, and like just pick up those pieces of her thoughts. Right? She just said it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, why? Why do you feel like this? What's happened? Like, you're a beautiful black girl, and you've got so much going on for you. Like, I know the world is a horrible place right now, but there's so much more. And she turned around and just said to me, Amy, like, everything I see in the paper, not paper, everything I see is always bad about black people. They're at a disadvantage. Life's going to be harder. We're being killed just because of the color of our skin. We're not being heard just because of the color of our skin. She had no joy for being a black person, like whatsoever. And then it got me thinking actually about, like the diet we're actually giving young people in school, even if we are teaching Black history or anything to do with like blackness, a lot of it is wrapped up in trauma. A lot of it actually is
Oh,
about
well, yeah,
slavery's trauma.
yeah,
Yeah, it's traumatic.
yeah,
Even if you're talking about, like, for example, I talk about crime and crime statistics and prison statistics, and then you'll see like black people are disproportionately represented within the criminal justice system. That's traumatic. Like, you're thinking, oh my gosh, does that mean me as a black person in my classroom, I might be wrapped up into this system as well? So a lot of it is traumatic, and it got me thinking, like, actually, no, we need to start, giving these kids some joy, making them feel like, actually, being black, my voice is valued. Being black, I will be seen. Being black, is not traumatic. It's so much more than what's always presented to me. So that's actually where it came from.
my gosh. I mean, and that's where I think that's where the misconception lies, right? Like, and I
Mm,
completely agree and resonate, because the only time like that we were in primary anyway, like teaching about like black history and narratives around that. And I mean, we forget about all these statues and we see them everywhere, and it's like, oh, look at that.
mm,
That's nice. But you don't actually know who this person is or what they are, or what they did. And
mm,
it like you say, it's wrapped up in trauma. And I think as like a white person, that is kind of, I don't know what it is. It's hard to like articulate. It's almost like that's the only way we've been groomed to understand, right?
yeah,
That, oh, we're not black, so we'll just talk about the trauma. We don't
yeah,
celebrate like the exciting things. We don't, like
no,
you say, like the joy of it. And like, I mean, I can't even imagine what that felt like for your daughter to say that. But then it's like,
mm,
where do you how do you like combat that? Because I think it's important that like they're highlighting and spotlighting these things in the news, that
mm,
it's disproportionate that like X amount of black people are you know kind of put in prison. And I was speaking to someone the other day actually,
yeah,
and he was saying that like the racism he faces, he's a black guy, and he was like saying that the
yeah,
racism he faces on a day-to-day basis is like so subtle but so obvious at the same time. Like he was saying
mm,
that he went out for drinks with his girlfriend, and he had like a backpack on, and they're like, oh, you can't come in this like bar. And it
mm,
wasn't like a club or anything, it's just like a bar. And they're like, oh, okay. And his girlfriend's white, and then they went back and his girlfriend had the backpack on and they went in fine. So like
oh my gosh.
there's like one or two things happening there. They're presuming that she's female and white, so there's nothing
Amy, you
going on.
gone? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You said one
I'm
or two
back.
things was happening, and then you
Oh.
shut off. Yeah, you're back.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, so one or two things in my mind is happening there. Either they are thinking, oh, she's female and white, so how could she
Mm,
possibly do anything sinister? Or they're thinking he's male and black, or they're just thinking black and white, which I hate. And
mm,
then he was saying that he also went to this thing of like a mayor, and he was like he was involved in it, or something. So he was like dressed up like real nice suit and stuff, and he was like
yeah,
saying that it's not like he was wearing like a tracksuit or not dressed for the occasion. And like the security like stopped him and were like, are you like meant to be here, da da da, and all this. And then when he went to find a seat, like people were saying, oh, I wasn't stopped, like I wasn't told. So he's like, and then I'm like, well, then why don't you challenge that? And he's like, because then I'll be the angry black man.
Yeah.
That's what I'll be. I'll be the angry black
Yeah.
man. And I don't want to be the angry black man. I just want to be the
Mm-hmm.
guy who lives my life. And like this guy, honestly, I'll have to send you the link
Oh
to the
my gosh,
episode when it
even
comes
just you
out.
just saying that just resonates with me so much. And
Yeah.
the situations I've been in, and I check my response, I check myself straight away because I'm like, if I respond how I really want to respond, I will be fitting into a stereotype that I don't want to be fitting into, which is the angry black woman.
Yeah.
So I become reserved and I become quiet. And I then automatically lose my own voice, which doesn't it's ironic because what I'm trying to do is give voice, right?
Yeah.
To 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 loads of people, to our young people. But there are times when I quieten my own voice because I recognize that I don't want to be a stereotype. Um, I recognize I might be the only black person in the room, or I might be the only black woman in the room. So I will just kind of sit back, just hear and then think in my mind, I'm like, okay, how do I deal with this? How do I challenge this? Does it really need to be challenged right now? And sometimes I haven't. Sometimes I haven't challenged it. And that's I still live with that afterwards, right? That still hurts sometimes, but I'm like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
the bigger picture, I'm trying to break boundaries, you're trying to take up space. So by doing that, sometimes I end up silencing my voice, but it just definitely resonated with me what you were saying about that the man you was talking about, like not wanting to be the angry black person, but the effect that has and the effect that can have on challenging racism
Yeah,
as well.
because then to me, right, it's like, well, how do you challenge it? Like it's such a
Mm,
minefield for me because
mm,
then I got to thinking after I spoke to him and like when we were preparing for our episode as well, I was kind of thinking, well then how do we then tell like people from like any kind of like race really, like
mm,
white excluded really, because I feel like you just don't. I think it's difficult in the sense that white people want to like communicate this message in the best way possible, but it's a very white British thing to want to be like super polite and non-offensive, and then what happens that is it's shrouded in like so much confusion, and you're like
mhm,
not wanting to say some things, but then you kind of don't want to like say everything, but you want to be honest. So
mm,
what then happens is you only get part of the story, you only get part of the picture. So then if you
yeah.
have like black children in your class that are facing these things, well, they're not going to come to you and tell you because you clearly, I mean, how a teacher who's white they couldn't understand that, but they could
Mhm,
potentially empathize with it and say that's like so shitty. But then it's like in my head, I'm very much like an advocate, and I don't know whether school will ever become this place. I don't know. I'd love it if
yeah.
it did, where there's just like there's no like let's just protect kids from everything. Let's just lay it down and say like
Mm,
this is what it's like and this is what it could be, and this is how we have these conversations, and then when they leave it's not such a jarring experience, and it's not like hang on a minute, everything was so nice in school and now I'm
mm,
finding that I'm being like targeted. And it's going back to like what your daughter's saying, that she's like seeing all this stuff in the media. It's like, well, should the media continue to spotlight that? Is that for the benefit of like
mm,
people like me who are trying to get some understanding of it, or is it more detrimental to people who are actually experiencing
mm.
racism every day? I don't know. Like it's just such a difficult thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but unfortunately, there's no balance right now, is there?
No,
I
there
suppose
isn't.
we're getting a little bit more of like when you talk about representation on the TV, but there still definitely isn't a balance. A lot of it is very, very traumatic. Like within the past month, you've had Child Q, there was a young black boy in Wales, there's another that was bullied, and I think the mother, if I recall correctly, I think she already spoke to the school about racism, and it was a potential racist attack on the young boy. You had another young black boy that was attacked in a racist attack in Bristol. You've had the Buffalo shooting, and this is within the last month or 2 months, right? So, has anyone seen any black joy within that time?
No.
No.
But
No.
how do we do it? Like, so say like a school wanted to do
Mm.
like a celebration, almost like Black Joy. Like what
Mm.
how would they do it? Like what do you think is like, is it something that like you do as like a thing, like a month, or would you like continuously do it like we do with like the British values? What do you
It
think?
has to become the culture of the school.
Yeah.
Like, black kids, black people are so aware of tokenism, and we don't want to feel othered. We don't want to feel like, oh, you're just doing this because Black History Month, because it is the month, right? It needs to become the culture and incorporate into the very heart of any school. So that goes down to your recruitment policies. What does that look like? Yeah, your representation of staff within the school. Do you know what I mean? The posters, your environment. What does your environment feel like? Your visitors that you're getting in, the places students are going to. It has to become like the very core of the school, so that the kids are seeing like representation, right? They're seeing themselves. You are not othered. It's not tokenistic. It's Black joy all the time. It's just joyful all the time. So it's not easy, but it can't be something that's done once, you know, once a month, once a year. I've just ticked this box and I've done this, and so now I'm doing Black Joy. That's not what it is. Do you know
No.
what I mean? That's no. It has to become a culture within the school. Schools have to like really, just change what they're doing. I know there are schools that are definitely doing it, but for it to become it needs to become integral. It needs to become part of the systems of the school, and it's nothing that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long graft, but things have to change. Like, generations are changing. Students, they need to be seeing themselves. Like, this is 2022, and we're still talking about this. Do you know what I mean?
Well, this is it. Like, it was like I saw a quote the other week, and it was like, 10 years since I think it was like the Sandy Hook thing, and it's like all that's
Yeah.
changed is
Hmm.
that well, nothing has changed. All it is that
No.
we get the news quicker, and it's like,
Exactly.
and then it shocked me so much that they were still having like their kind of annual like gun show,
I
basically.
know. I was so
How
taken away by
insensitive is
in
that?
Texas as well, and I'm sure it was
100%.
on the anniversary. It was on the what was it when I read it? It was on the same day of the funerals of the Buffalo shooting as well. Like, it's wild, and I'm on the news when I was this morning when I was driving. There's been another mass shooting in America today in a hospital. Like, it's crazy,
I mean,
and
it does. I mean, have you debated that with your kids in your class? Have you like asked whether do you think guns should be banned in the US?
oh, that is coming up after the holidays.
Oh, that's going to be such
That is
an
coming up.
interesting one to hash out, because I
Mm,
understand both sides, but I don't
mm.
understand why they're not so rigorous. Like,
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah, I typically look at that when we study the Constitution. So we study the British Constitution, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
look at the US Constitution. So it kind of comes up nicely with about the gun laws and policies in America. But yeah, things just, I don't know. This is why I tell the students, like, look, we're still talking about either gun laws 10 years on. We're still talking about Black joy and making the curriculum represent everybody, like 10 years, 20 years, 50 years on. Like, this is why you guys need to be those active citizens, right? Make a change. What can you do as young people? What does that look like for young people? Is that writing a letter to your head teacher, to the governors, to your local council? Because your voice is important. Your voice is valued. Let people know how you feel. Um, yeah.
Do you think that's something that existed like in your school before you? Or do you feel like it's something you've kind of like championed?
What existed?
Like the black joy sort of thing within the
Um,
culture of your school?
No, not when I was at school. We
Yeah.
had Black History Month, and that was it.
Yeah, but that's like so
That's all
weird
we
how
had.
it's still like a thing, right? So like normally like Black History Month like has a thing within the month. It's like, oh, you talk about like why we're doing
Mhm.
it, and like you say, the trauma and all this sort of thing. And then you talk about like notable black people in positions of power and
Mhm.
success, and then it's like the 31st of October, and then you move on to something else, and then it's
Yeah,
Remembrance Day.
exactly.
It's
And but
just so
then
weird
also
to
during that
me.
time, it is weird because it's like this is just history, right? This is everyone's history, regardless of who's at the forefront. This is everyone's history. So why is it also being labelled as Black history? Why is it just all traumatic and you're teaching me that I've come a lot of time from slavery? And then also these noble Black people, definitely noble, but they're also either civil rights activists. So again, they've got their position through the trauma, or they're sports or musicians
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, sure. I mean, one that like I don't know. I know Twinkl are like constantly looking at how to not be that person who is exactly like what
Mm,
you're saying, right? But it's such a big company, they don't know. And I know they don't mind me saying that because they're constantly trying to learn and revise and and grow from it. And I mean, last year they
send them
did.
my way.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like they I think we need guiding and
Mm,
guidance from somebody who's like it's just refreshing because like with the best will in the world, I think it comes back to the fact that
mm,
we're white and we just like we're just trying to navigate, and really we
mm,
need somebody or like people who you're saying are represented within that workforce to kind of say actually
mm.
that's not what kids need to know. Like even like that,
Yeah,
what you just said, like why is it called Black History Month? We don't call it like White History Month or Chinese History Month or
exactly.
Egyptian. I don't know if that's the correct term, but you like learning Egyptians. But it does seem very strange to me.
Mm,
And I just want to learn about it, and I just ultimately from this episode, I just want like teachers to go away with like a new perspective on how they can do something like better in their classrooms.
mm,
And I think that like what you do, like you say, it's so refreshing that we don't. I think the trauma is important. I think like that's always going
mm.
like questions are always going to come up from that. Like, but the growth and the things and that are exciting that are happening right now.
Yeah,
It's good to celebrate. Like, I mean, how old is your
it,
daughter?
it
If you don't
definitely
if you
is.
don't mind me asking.
Yeah, she's 15.
Wow. So that is very young to see such poor
Yeah,
representation and notice it as well.
yeah. But they have, like, even so, my daughter noticed it and she verbalized how she was feeling. But even from when my son was about 6 years old, he said to me one day, "Why is there no Black people in video games?" Right?
It's like, what do you even
And
answer to that? Like, what do you even say?
besides, I don't know, son, maybe we should write a letter to somebody and see if we can change that.
Yeah.
Because in the majority of your video games, and I didn't even think of it, like I was like, oh yeah, actually.
But yeah, because I
And
think of like
again, that's
Mario and like little Sonic and stuff, and I'm like, I just feel like it's such a cartoon, so I didn't even think of representation in that. But it's a very good
yeah,
question. It's very
it's a
good.
very good question, right? So like kids see it, they know it, and they feel it. They feel it. They definitely do. And that's why it's yes, we need to get the balance right in what we're doing in these classrooms. And there's like I from my classroom anyway, what I do definitely where I can do representation, making sure if that's even like the smallest thing of what does my PowerPoints look like, the visitors that I'm getting in, making sure that I like looking at the different cultures with my classroom as well. So like for example, when we was teaching about British values, looking at the values of all the students that were in my classroom, that they're like their different cultures, what do they value, how does that change over generations as well. Looking at even just the word British values, because that can segregate a lot of students, right? They might be like, well, I'm not British, this doesn't fit to me. Do you know what I mean? So even like looking at the word and what does that mean for all these students within my classroom. um Yeah, so there are definitely a couple of things that can be done, and just kind of considering, like, again, I'm saying, what does our representation look like? Incorporating the cultures of your classroom, getting their voices heard, and not just what's happened in the past, like their actual experiences, that their experiences as young people right now, and how does that culture change over their generations, and looking at actually, but even your wording and the language you're using, what perspectives is this coming from? Do you know what I mean? Is it coming from like a, a racist ideology? Actually, is my students going to feel inferior by the words that I'm using and how this is being presented? So there are a few things that can be done in the classroom, but on the bigger picture, it definitely needs to be a culture of the school to make an effective, long-lasting change. It has to become incorporated within the body of the school, most definitely.
Yeah, and you know what? I think a lot of schools would be like, yeah, we're like diverse, and like a lot of
Mm,
schools recently, like we've done like a couple of interviews with schools who are welcoming like refugee children into their schools, and
yeah,
it's kind of like, yeah, but at the same time, it's like you need to diversify for everybody,
yeah.
like regardless of what they look like, or
Mm-hmm.
it's you've got to be like represented. A great example of this as well is that somebody I interviewed week before last, they have a couple of refugee children arriving in the next couple of weeks, and they were sort of saying
Brilliant.
that they feel that it will be an easier transition because a lot of the children in their school speak Polish, or they
Okay.
speak Russian, or so
Mm,
it will be easy for those children to kind of like fit in a little bit more. But then it's like, she was saying, even the way, like you say, like the language you use in the class, like these children have
mm,
fled from war, essentially. And she was saying, as a primary teacher, you say, right, kids, like clean this up. This room's a bomb site. Well, let's not say that
mm.
anymore, because she was saying you didn't even think about stuff like that, or when like you do like
Yeah,
fire alarm practices, you don't realize that, like,
yeah,
that what that means in terms of post-traumatic stress. But it's diversifying, I think, from the top, right? And
yes,
because for me, like,
yeah.
I think it's slightly nightmarish. My son's white, that he would go into an all-white school, all from the
Mm,
same background. Everybody's had the same experience. Like, what a scary sort of situation. Because I was lucky enough to go to a school where, like, there were like like I was one of the only English people, which I loved because sorry, turn that stupid
where
notification
did you
off.
go to school?
We lived in Spain for most of our lives,
Okay.
so um, we had everybody in the school, and I think there was like three
Mm,
English kids, me included, in our year, which is nice. It's like, oh, you're from England, and England felt like this very small place, very far away. But
mm.
then, yeah, most people were like French, or there was quite a few Moroccan people there, a lot of American people, but yeah. And then, like, most people spoke like three or four different languages, which was a bit like, oh. um, but yeah, I feel like, you do thrive off other people's like experiences, and knowing that, it's all right. You have a different situation, but like, it doesn't devalue anyone else's or yours, in
No,
fact.
not at all, not at all. It makes you a more rounded person, right? Like being exposed to like all these different cultures, especially like Britain's a very diverse place. So we
It
need to
is.
like expose these kids much more within a classroom setting to what their world looks like,
Yeah,
you know, and
absolutely.
can't just come from the media. We can't
No.
we can't just leave it up to
Well, that's a
up to the
scary
media.
thought, that it just comes from the me. I
It
like,
is.
hopefully,
But
like,
some people are okay with that. Like I've had spoke to people and they've said to me like, well, I teach in a school where there's no black people, or there's literally only white people here and all our staff are white, so why should I do this? Like I've actually had people say that to me.
I have no words, like you, Paul, but
And
I have
then
no
and
words.
then I become restrained because again I got like angry. I don't want to become angry, but it's not even just me being angry; it's me being passionate. And with passion, my hands might start going, and I might get a little bit more bass in my voice.
Hey, there's
And
nothing
I'm like,
wrong with
one,
that.
and emotional at the same time. And I'm like, wow, like it's where that I now have to have a conversation with you to let you to make you understand why you should care about Black people, which is a totally different conversation that I don't really want to have with you.
Yeah, and somebody said something to me. So I'll give you a bit of a context and see what you
Mm,
think of this, right? So there's a podcast in Twinkl, right? And she just started out and she put a cover art out there, like this cartoony type one. And on the front cover was like the people who were like basically the production team behind it. And we got a complaint about it because they were saying that it's not diverse. You know, you're
mm,
all white, you're all female, it's not diverse. It's not good. So, oh, and it's not representative of the teaching demographic for early years, which is what her podcast is. And then
mm,
she was sort of saying, like, well, I can't change who's in our team. I was like, no, of course you can't change who's in your team. And it is just a picture, so people don't know the other diversities that may lie behind that.
mm,
But I mean, it's also like, I kind of get it because you can't do anything about it. And she's like, I'm being,
mm.
it's such a silly thing. She's like, I'm being like scrutinized because of like the color of my skin. I'm like, you're not really though. I was like, this person is just obviously having
But
a bit
it
of a
raises a
go.
question, right? Yeah, but it also raises a question, right?
Yeah,
About who's on that.
but it's a difficult one, isn't it? Like it's like
It definitely
yeah,
is. It definitely is a different. I definitely get like it's difficult, but it also raises that question because if right, put it this way, if it was a board of all CEOs and they were all white men, and so it still raise a question like, okay, so what's happened here? Why this looks like this? Obviously,
sure, sure.
context. There's obviously context to it that we're not privy to, but it does raise a question. But like you said, there's nothing you can change about it because that's actually what your production team looks like. But then it might raise a more question like, okay, have we maybe done enough regarding our recruitment policies and who we're recruiting?
Nope. The answer is
There we
well, that's
go.
what it comes down to, right? And like,
Yeah,
um, it's like, yeah, of course you can't change this. You can't make people
yeah,
up, like if
exactly.
that's your
And
art cover. But
exactly.
you're exactly right. It's got to come from higher up, and but then
Mm.
like I know the BBC. Like I used to work at Bite Size, and they were saying I know on their job adverts they put they put in we welcome people from minority backgrounds and people of disability. It's like, are you basically saying that's an advantage because you have a lack of that in your workforce? I feel like that is what you're saying. I obviously won't put that in because that's dragging them through the mud. But I'm just saying it. I just found it really weird that they would like
Mm.
say that so brashly, right? I don't know.
Mm.
It's just odd.
But I think sometimes it's needed. I
Yeah,
think sometimes it's needed to like know like, okay, maybe I've got more of a chance. Like
yeah,
maybe. Do you know what I mean? So I get like how the wording can be like, why would you even need to put this here? Like, shouldn't that be the state? Like, shouldn't you just do that anyway? Like, regardless, we shouldn't be able to. But I think sometimes those things are needed to let people know actually we are trying to do something or make what we have better
but
than
it's
it
like,
was to make it more diverse.
but like when you're talking to your kids, like I imagine they're thinking like careers, what can you do? Like, does that hold you
Mm.
back, right? Which I mean is just a
Mm.
terrible question to ask anyway, isn't it? But it's like you think of big companies like that, and it's
Yeah.
almost like it is synonymous of white men
Mm.
because it's techie and it's like quite stuffy. And I guess like if you're a woman of color, then you're not thinking like maybe that's a place for me. But it's
Mm.
just sad that is like, but I get it as well. I just find it quite uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable for the person reading that is what I mean. That's what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say.
yeah. I get you. But we've got to start getting uncomfortable, Amy.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes things stay the same because we are so comfortable with like the status quo. That's why sometimes things don't change. We have to start getting really uncomfortable and like not talking about you, but like reflecting on maybe why do I feel uncomfortable about this?
Yeah,
Why has
absolutely.
this made why has
Absolutely.
this made me feel this type of way? Like why have I responded to something in this way? And because we've all got our own unconscious bias, all of us. Do you know what I mean? No matter
Yeah.
what we look like, where we've come from, and it's not until then that we start reflecting on who we are and our biases and all of that, and our even sometimes down to our identity and who we are as individuals, that we start becoming uncomfortable, and that's where a lot of changes happen.
But
Is
that
when we are in that mucky place.
yeah, well, that's exactly what I was trying to articulate earlier. There's like, when
Mm,
like you want to be honest of everything, but like you don't know why you feel a little bit about
mm,
stuff, and then it's
mm,
like, yeah, that's a great way to put it. Like, why do I feel uncomfortable about this? And I think like to answer that, like why I feel uncomfortable is because I guess I don't see why it would have to be so segmented. It would just have to be
mm,
like anyone can apply for this job, anyone can do this thing, right? If
mm.
you're like, right, I like the sound of that, I like the skill set, whatever. Um,
Yeah,
so for me, I'm a bit like, why? But then for someone else with a different experience, they're thinking, oh, maybe like, like you say, it's like a welcome.
yeah,
It's a welcomed thing.
yeah. Mm.
But I
Yeah,
almost hate I
definitely.
almost
Because
hate that it is welcomed. I don't know. It's just weird to me. Like I
it's a funny place, right? I get it.
yeah, yeah. I hate that it's like, oh, thank you for recognizing that I am, you know, one
Yeah,
of these
thank you.
categories.
Yeah,
I
thank you
just,
for letting me know that I'll be more welcome because I'm black. Cheers.
yeah, I don't know. And I think that is like the cusp of it. Like like if someone said to me that term's offensive, I don't like that term, I'd be like,
Mm,
okay, I won't like because I just want to learn. I just want to like understand as much as
mm,
possible. And I think that's what's missing is that they don't tell you that in uni. They don't tell you that in teaching placements. They don't tell you that even when
yeah.
you're a teacher. It's only through years of experience that you would maybe start to question these things. And yeah, I'm really, really like
Yeah, I
stuck.
definitely, but I agree with you. I think from going on for what you were just saying, like that, a lot of teacher training programs are missing that training.
Yeah,
I'm missing that training because there you have a lot of young people that are becoming teachers and going into like very diverse schools. Excuse me, and I just don't know how to like deal with certain stuff or challenge with certain stuff or even how that could affect them as an individual, right? And
yeah,
this is what's happened in my classroom, or this is what I've been exposed to. How I haven't felt like I've dealt with it properly. I didn't know the channels. How does that make me feel? And I think that's definitely what's lacking. Even for me, do you know, as a black person, when I was like training to become a teacher, I'm still going through my training now. Um, just who do I talk to about race? Dealing with certain issues. Do you know? Like, lucky enough, I've got friends that teach who are black, so I can go talk to them within the education field. But there's not a lot of us. I think in Bristol, we've only got 36 black teachers. Um,
oh,
yeah, yeah, exactly. And we've only got 36 black teachers. So um, even for black student teachers that are training, who do I then talk to regarding any issues or anything that comes up? Because I am going to feel more comfortable talking to a black person regarding any issues, but there's not a lot of us. There's not a lot of us at all. So where does that go? How do I feel? How do I move on from that?
yeah.
So
And
yeah,
then
a
like,
lot needs to happen.
but then like universities won't acknowledge that either, will they? Like, well, I don't know if they won't. That's probably quite harsh, but I mean, they
Mm,
won't. They probably don't think of it, right? I mean,
mm,
there were no black lecturers on my course. Yeah, they were mostly we had like two male, then the rest were women, and then like one of the male who was like a maths like PhD, who he was like brilliant as well.
mm.
I think I'm sure he was like part Cantonese, like he was like half British,
Okay.
half Cantonese, but like yeah, that was like his kind of I guess ethnically diverse we were exposed to. And
Okay.
nobody ever mentioned anything on my training about if you go into a diverse school. And I trained in Liverpool, so you go into some of the most challenging schools probably in the
Yeah.
country,
Bet.
where they're dealing with stuff that is everything and anything. And and I mean they're fabulous schools. They get like the best funding because
Mm,
they're really deprived areas. But yeah, it was kind of like, oh, if I see this kid like challenging this thing, like my brain is
Mm.
almost programmed to think that my behavior management has told me that's not okay. I've been told that
Yeah.
that's not okay to do.
Mm.
So like, what do I do? Like, here are my steps to do, and you kind of like go through your training, but nothing actually says, hang on a minute, that's not really the case. This kid isn't doing anything wrong, and it's just mad.
Yeah.
And then you build up
Yeah.
this thing, and it's
Yeah.
I just think it's real sad that it starts
Yeah.
right from the stem, and like you say, the
Mm.
wider picture, it's got to be changed, doesn't it? Like
Yeah,
at the
because
very
you
heart of
think
it.
from what you've just said, if a lot of student teachers are going through that, like, okay, like you said, this is my behavior management, and that's kind of one of the first things, right? Your behavior management in the classroom. What voice have you just shut down already without kind of really like listening to what's being said, right? But you're just kind of on this behavior, which is that's what most people do. I'm not saying this, you know what I mean? Like that's what
Yeah.
you've been taught to do is behavior management, and that you've said that, but actually, what's the wider picture on there? And this is where those nuances come in place. Actually, that's missing. But we have like I know what is happening is instead of it being top down, we have a lot of teachers that are trying to make changes within schools. I can definitely say that for sure within Bristol. Like we have our own like network, the Bristol Decolonising Network. There are actually a lot of teachers on there that are trying to make changes within schools. But like we said again, it's a lot of it is from the bottom, right? It's from teachers. It's not coming from that kind of top down approach, which is missing. So hopefully some changes will start. We'll start seeing some changes.
I
I
think
can
that
only be hopeful.
I think that'd be really cool though. Like, I mean, if you drop me a message with the name of that network, and then I don't know whether there's maybe other networks out there that can get in touch, and we can build like a
Definitely.
wider pit, like a wider kind of
Yeah.
community. I don't know, but it's definitely worth looking into because, you know, it stays very much just that community until it doesn't,
Mm,
right? Until someone's like, oh, do you know there's like this whole thing of where like teachers are trying to make this
yes.
movement. And before you know,
Yes.
the powers that be,
Exactly.
Ofsted and all that, are like taking notice, and then it starts to become something that people are actually investing time and money into.
Exactly.
And it's long overdue for sure. Tanisha, honestly, like, thank you so much. It's so refreshing to speak to you. Like, it's just lovely.
Oh,
You're
bless
such a
you.
lovely person as well. Um,
Oh, thank you, Amy.
and I've never met a citizenship teacher before. So
Oh, I'm the
that's really
first.
exciting
But
for me. I mean, I would love to have done your job. It sounds amazing. Sounds
oh
a
no,
lot of
that's why I
fun.
tattooed myself, right? Because I love it so much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what
I'm dedicated now.
yeah, well, that's it. You're committed. You're not going anywhere.
I'm a lifer.
I hope they give you a pay rise for that.